Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Welcome back for another episode of Legal Tea. Today's topic is a current trend, something going on in the current time that is pertinent to my little estate and elder law world. This week's episode is going to be about a guy who lived in Chicago, Illinois, who passed away in 2016. Well, his estate ended up catching some news headlines, even super recently, which is how I found out about this whole thing. Because even though he passed away in 2016, it's been quite the saga, to say the least. Mainly because his estate is worth multiple millions of dollars, specifically $11 million, and he did not have an estate plan at all. And guess what? All of his immediate family had already passed away. So now what, right? Well, needless to say, his estate turned into a big old puzzle to figure out who were the rightful heirs of his estate. And actually, according to an article in People magazine by Charmaine Patterson, this marks the largest unclaimed estate in the country. So let's first talk about who he is. Let's give him a name, right? So his name is Joseph Stankak, and he resided prior to his passing in Chicago, Illinois, in the Gage Park neighborhood, if you know where that is. According to a CBS News Chicago piece, some of his neighbors actually came out and spoke about Joseph and claimed that he was, quote, a quiet man who did not spend a ton of money and even repaired his home himself, end quote. On December 23rd, 2016, Joseph passed away at the age of 87 years old, and he did so quietly. According to the People magazine article by Patterson, Joseph never had any children, and while he had 7 siblings, all 7 siblings had died before him. And crazy enough, like all of this is not already crazy, all 7 of his siblings did not have children either. So it was just him and him only. What we do know about Joseph's family is that, according to the People magazine by Patterson, most of his family lives abroad, specifically in Poland and Slovakia. After some really intense research, his parents were born in Poland, hence the affiliation to Central Europe. And at some point in their family history, a family member or members moved to the United States because, a little flash forward to talking about who was getting Joseph's estate, family members were also located here in the United States. They were located in Chicago, of course, that's where Joseph resided, but also in New Jersey, New York, and Minnesota. Now, New Jersey, that makes sense because although he lived in Chicago, I did read somewhere that his parents, while they were from Europe, they got married in New Jersey. So, yeah, they're a little bit all over the place, geographically speaking. After Joseph died, the state treasurer's office in Illinois had to get involved because no one claimed his assets, his investments, etc. And companies and places began turning them over to the state of Illinois to deal with, since it had been years after Joseph's passing. He passed away, remember, in 2016, and things started to get turned over to the state of Illinois in 2019. That's because his property turned over to the state of Illinois, their Unclaimed Property Fund. And hey, by the way, we did a Legal Tea episode on unclaimed property many episodes ago, if you care to listen. So what that means is that Joseph's financial institutions and banks noticed there had been no activity on his assets for several years. And according to the state treasurer's announcement about Joseph's estate, they shared, quote, unclaimed property includes forgotten bank accounts, unpaid life insurance benefits, the contents of safe deposit boxes, and other items. Returning unclaimed property is a core function of the Illinois State Treasurer's Office, no matter how long it takes, end quote. So that's exactly what happened. His assets got turned over to the state treasurer's office, and it kind of became their problem to find Joseph's nearest blood relatives to receive his estate. Interestingly, very little is even known about how Joseph acquired his $11 million in wealth. One quirky thing we know about Joseph is he did have a boat that he had named Easy. Hey, so maybe he acquired his wealth easily or something. Once the treasurer's office caught wind of Joseph's passing, which was about 3 years after he had actually passed away, because that's when assets, like I said earlier, started funneling over to their unclaimed property fund, an attorney at Piercy and Associates in Barrington, Illinois, named Kenneth Piercy, got involved. Now, Kenneth is well known in the community for doing high-dollar estate planning. So this sort of case probably didn't really faze him. It was probably up his alley. Anyway, the firm started working with the treasurer's office to make the claim on behalf of Joseph's estate, as Kenneth was appointed as the estate's administrator. Kenneth shared, quote, "It is a great privilege to be able to assist the heirs in collecting their rightful inheritance," end quote. As I was doing my research for this episode, I just got a little curious and I Googled Kenneth just to check him out, check out the firm, that sort of thing. And on his website, under his bio, it confirms what I just shared about Kenneth. So just to name a few, he has, quote, served as trustee for trusts with assets in excess of $10 million. He is frequently retained to prove heirship, remove funds from the county treasurer, and distribute the funds to their rightful owners. And he has represented a corporate client with assets in excess of $1 trillion, end quote. And yes, that was trillion with a T. So it seems like he's going to do just fine as administrator of Joseph's estate. So now that we're to this point, right? So we have this guy, Joseph, who passed away a few years back. His assets got turned over to the state's unclaimed property fund. And now an attorney has been appointed as his estate's administrator. So when I say administrator, think executor, by the way. And even though this whole story is crazy, it just gets more crazy because, like I said at the beginning, Joseph died without an estate plan. No will, no trust. So his estate goes by Illinois' intestacy laws, which are the laws that govern when someone passes away without an estate plan. They're sort of like a default estate plan. After all, way too many people pass away without an estate plan, so it makes sense why these laws are so needed. I'm sure Illinois is similar-ish to Indiana's intestacy laws that say who kind of gets first dibs is family. So there's a pecking order on who gets what. Though, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, Joseph was not married. He had no children. He had siblings, but they had all passed away. And his siblings didn't have children either. Like, what are the odds of that? So as an article in Block Club Chicago shared, Kenneth, the attorney administrator, and investigators had to pull together a family tree for Joseph. What a project. The Block Club Chicago article said it took years to pull together records to build Joseph's family tree. And Kenneth said that the tree, quote, grew roots 5 generations deep, leading back to living cousins once or twice removed in many countries, end quote. Finally, after all those years of investigations and building Joseph's family tree, it was uncovered that Joseph's estate would go to his, are you ready for this? 119 heirs, which were spread out in Poland, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Germany, United Kingdom, Canada, and a whole bunch of cities in the United States, Iowa, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, and Chicago. Holy cow. In the Block Club Chicago article, they shared an awesome picture that you totally have to check out of Kenneth Piercy and Rodney Piercy, which I'm assuming is some relative of Kenneth, in front of a table with a long scroll of paper. Kenneth had shared in this article, quote, "In my office, I have a scroll 15 feet long that can go across the entire room. I've never seen a case this complicated before." Now, you may be thinking, okay, with an $11 million estate and 119 heirs, how much are they all getting? Well, the Block Club Chicago article, in that article, Piercy shared that it'll take time, likely another few years, to get the money distributed, since there are some international ties going on. But after taxes, on average, an heir will get a check in the amount of roughly $60,000 each. You know, I guess that number, the $11 million number, sure shrinks when it has to be split between so many people. And you know what's kind of sad, though, too, about all of these heirs? The article shared that none of the heirs have ever heard of Joseph before. So that's how far out the family tree got. To me, it's both sad and super crazy to think about that. Though Kenneth, the attorney administrator, did mention that he thinks the money will be life-changing for many of the heirs. He shared, quote, "We had to find basically the baptismal records, the birth certificates, marriage records, everything that we could find. The family had no idea, and I think this will be life-changing for many of them," end quote. And while Joseph's story may sound crazy, likely to not happen, and, just plain lucky for those beneficiaries, don't think this is a one and done type of thing. Now, would you even believe me if I told you that I've worked on a similar-ish case? The biggest difference was the amount of the estate. Our case that I worked on was significantly smaller, so of course it didn't hit the news like Joseph's estate. I actually don't even remember the amount of this estate I'm thinking of, but it was a gentleman, and he was single, and he had one child. But prior to his passing, his only child had passed away before him. Now, he was Italian descent, so when he passed away, we kind of looked around at each other like, well, now what? We ended up having our own version of Kenneth's scroll. I remember us having a huge poster board of this guy's family tree. And ultimately, we did end up finding his closest blood relatives. They were in Italy, and they got his estate. But like Joseph and his heirs, our client's heirs had no idea our client existed either. And in my office, when we draft estate plans, we ask this very question, which sometimes seems really silly when a client has a rather large family, but we still do. We ask, now if you and all of your beneficiaries pass away, say in a big common accident, then what? Who do you want to get your stuff? And it normally throws people off, like, who did you just kill off, Jenny? And sometimes people actually get a little uneasy about this question. It's really yucky to think about, right? Like everyone is gone, but it's so important. Like I said, especially for smaller families. So if and when you #do your estate plan, if your attorney does not ask this question, bring it up. Make sure this issue is appropriately addressed in your plan. These stories here on Legal Tea, just when you think, that is so crazy, Jenny, that won't happen to my family. Please keep in mind, all of these stories here on Legal Tea are real people. Whether they're celebrities, like on my Estate Planning of the Rich and Famous episodes, or they're like Joseph here under a Current Trends episode. Or even if they're clients of my office, like under a Cautionary Tale episode. Everyone is real. None of these people are make-believe. So I wouldn't just generally assume the things you hear on, here on Legal Tea, they won't happen to you. Don't generally assume that. These real people in these episodes could be you, your family, or your friends. So just remember, you're not immune from becoming a Legal Tea episode. Okay, let's wrap this episode up. Next week's topic is on estate planning of the rich and famous. And on that episode, we're going to be diving into what happened following the passing of the music legend James Brown. You know, sometimes he's called the godfather of soul, but he sure isn't going to ever be called the godfather of estate planning. So tune in next Tuesday, Legal Tea listeners, to hear all about it. Talk to you then, and stay well.